Glad to be here.
Great.
Thank you all for your service to the country.
In the days ahead, we're going to make sure that the full resources of the federal government continue to be brought to bear in confronting the coronavirus.
What should we be telling our constituents about what to expect?
The risk to the American public is low. We have an aggressive containment strategy that really has worked up to this time. We do believe we're going to continue to see new cases.
But first, bracing for a coronavirus outbreak here. Good evening. I'm Christine Johnson.
I'm Maurice Dubois, now on CBS 2 and streaming on CBSN New York. CBS 2 has learned hundreds of people are being monitored for possible coronavirus exposure in New York State.
The health department says 700 people in the state have been asked to voluntarily self-isolate for 2 weeks. And that includes 83 people on Long Island and 8 in Westchester County. It is important to point out that there are no confirmed cases in the state, and no one in New York City or in New Jersey is being monitored.
Local leaders began preparing for the possibility of an outbreak following a warning from the CDC. We have team coverage for you tonight. Hazel Sanchez in New Jersey, but we begin in the city with CBS 2's Andrea Klein-Thomas live at City Hall. Andrea.
Well, Christine and Maurice, it's important to reiterate that there are no confirmed cases of the coronavirus here in the city. We're told that everyone who has been quarantined has been released at this moment, but that could change. And when it does, the city says it's ready, but it also said it could use more help from the federal government. Mayor de Blasio was flanked by city health officials to outline the plan to address the coronavirus.
We're in a state of high vigilance, high readiness, all elements of the city government.
When necessary, 1,200 hospital beds will be available throughout the city to treat affected patients. 1.5 million surgical masks have also been bought for healthcare professionals and first responders, including the NYPD.
We've given out thousands upon thousands of gloves, masks, and wipes to all our commands. Patrol, housing, transit has them.
For everyday New Yorkers, there's no need to use a mask.
Schools are providing parents with information, hoping they're the first line of defense to keep their children home who have flu-like symptoms and have been to the affected areas or exposed to someone who has.
Every New Yorker needs to take responsibility. So if you have a symptom and you have that nexus, if your child does, act.
Still, city leaders want the federal government to do more. De Blasio says the city needs access to 300,000 more masks. He also wants the CDC to utilize local labs and lead on the medical community to help develop a test for the coronavirus. De Blasio also says travel restrictions should be extended to include more countries.
Hong Kong, Iran, Italy, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand. It just stands to reason that anyone coming in needs to be screened. And if they have symptoms, they need to be quarantined.
Meantime, Governor Cuomo will ask the legislature for an extra $40 million for the Department of Health.
We've gone through a number of public health emergencies that we have dealt with, and each one seems new and unique. But we've handled situations like this in the past, and we're handling this one also.
Now, leaders say that it's important not to spread fear. They don't want people to panic, but they want them to be informed. Doctors say the coronavirus, the illness has not been as severe outside of China. So that's the good news. To prevent it, though, the coronavirus and any other virus, they say the rules are the same. Wash your hands frequently, cover your cough with your elbow, and of course, get your flu shot. Reporting live outside of City Hall, Andrea Klein-Thomas, CBS 2 News.
In other news, the Pope has died.
She was recently featured in the Netflix docuseries Pandemic. And Dr. Medad, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us again this morning. A lot more questions people have about how prepared we are for this right now. What would you say to that?
So everyone across the nation is ramping up their preparedness. This is something that we know is very concerning. China has given us this window of time, if you will, and so we need to make sure we're using this window of time very effectively. Everyone, all healthcare systems need to look and brush up on their surge management plans. They need to make sure they have good staffing, space, systems, processes in place to be able to care for patients that will present with coronavirus disease. We don't know how many are circulating or already in the United States. The first case in California was a wake-up call, something that we were expecting. We don't know how many more are out there, so we need to ramp up diagnostic capabilities, and we're glad that CDC has finally brought in their clinical case definition, so now clinicians can test people that they think have the coronavirus disease without a very narrow process in place with the
Meaning
CDC.
you could only test people before who had recently come back from one of the affected areas or who had been in close contact with someone who had come back from one of those
Exactly.
areas?
It was a very narrow clinical case definition, and we know that there are over 36 countries reporting coronavirus disease outside of China. And in fact, if we look at it today, there are more cases mounting outside of China than even inside of China. And so broadening the clinical case definition, it should have happened weeks ago, unfortunately, but we're glad that it finally did happen.
Hey, doctor, what's your professional judgment whether the arrival of spring will do things to take the case numbers down? Will warm weather do to this virus what it typically does to the flu?
Well, I think a really great country to look at is Singapore. And Singapore, obviously, if you look at the temperature there, it's almost summer, and there are still cases that are coming up in Singapore, which shows that even with warm weather, this virus may not actually go away. So with seasonal flu, we know that it is more common during the winter months, during the cold time. It's actually around all year long, but it's more common during the winter months. But I think in Singapore, you're seeing that the cases are still arising. So we can't really tell, but I think Singapore is a country we should continue to look at.
Can I ask a question? One of the things we've talked about all morning is what the Fed can do, and part of the argument about what the Fed can do is trying to create some space, a little bit of a pause button, so that the medical community and the rest of the world can try to understand this disease, I shouldn't say disease better, but understand coronavirus better. And so the question is, how much time do you think it would take for us to understand this? Because you do have so many different views about the severity of this situation.
So it's very important to get the full picture in order to understand what we're dealing with. However, at the same time, the more you wait, the more human toll is going to mount. And so we need to continue to look at public health measures and implement public health measures. At the same time, we need transparency in data to understand what is the severity.
But do you think in 2 weeks you'll know? We'll have a really a meaningfully better census? Is it a month? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 8 weeks? Is it? I think that's what we're all trying to get a handle on here.
The timeline is very, very difficult to establish. We're only 2 months into this particular outbreak, and if you look at previous outbreaks, we usually actually don't know the full effect until after this entire outbreak essentially is over, and that's when you're able to look at the totality and the overall case picture of how many deaths are associated with this particular disease, what is the case fatality rate. So right now everything is a guess. So right now, even though we're saying 2.3%, that may very well change tomorrow or the next day. But at the same time, we just need to rely on the information that's coming out right now and making the decisions based on science that we're seeing at the very moment, because we need to make sure that we have a good pulse on, again, the human aspect of it, the societal aspect of it, and the economic aspect of it.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to read an email that I received from Governor Cuomo. Now, as you know, I have tried very hard to try to reach his office, and I wrote to the Health Department of New York to find out what's going on with the COVID-19 cases in Buffalo. So I received this email, which I thought was very telling on how incompetent our representatives, especially the governors, are. Dear Paul, of the dozens of proposals in my 2020 agenda, one issue in particular rises to the top in its urgency and scale: tackling the climate crisis. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? The biggest thing that is happening to our country is COVID-19, not fucking climate change. And this is the problem with our representatives. They have cognitive dissonance in what the fuck is going on in our country. Total incompetence. When are they going to wake up and actually do something for our fucking country?
Infectious disease experts in South Korea have agreed to the use of antiviral drugs in the treatment of severe coronavirus cases, senior patients, and those with underlying diseases. On the other hand, it was concluded that young patients or those with mild symptoms seem to have improved after 10 days and without any antiviral treatment.
Young and healthy people have mostly shown improvement without any special treatment, but older patients or those with underlying diseases are in need of the medication from an early stage.
Experts says this difference in treatment depending on a patient's age is actually quite normal.
Most viral infections tend to heal even without any treatment, thanks to our body's immune system. But old age in itself can raise risks, and many senior patients have underlying diseases, so it's recommended that they undergo antiviral treatment.
The government's guidelines recommended Cletra, an antiretroviral medication used to treat AIDS for a duration of 7 to 10 days. Chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, a medication used to prevent and treat malaria, can be used as an alternative. But experts says while the government's announcement may sound promising, it might not make much of a difference to current treatment methods.
There won't be a significant difference in the treatment methods. It's an antiviral drug that we're already using, and its effectiveness has not been fully proven. It's still just a recommendation.
But the expert is optimistic, saying that the recurrence rate of the novel coronavirus is low.
It seems unlikely that a recovered patient will catch the virus again. In fact, there are very few reports of patients being reinfected when they've recovered from other coronavirus diseases such as SARS or MERS.
He added that all 7 of the patients who have made full recoveries in South Korea had no serious underlying diseases and are unlikely to be reinfected. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
As coronavirus cases spread all over the world, we are getting puzzlingly bad, incomplete, or sometimes contradictory information from health authorities. Hello, everyone. This is Chris Martinson here with your COVID-19, aka the honey badger virus update. It's March 2nd, 2020. Here's a few. Let's just take a look at some of these. The number of confirmed cases has now reached 90,000. I think that's vastly understated because of how China was massaging their numbers, and I think Iran isn't being completely honest, and all of that. But let's go with that for now. And the number of cases outside China surpassed a magic number, 10,000 if you like big round numbers. Italy, 340 new cases, raising their total to over 2,000 right now. And their death toll's up to 52 with 18 new deaths. Recently, Spain, 36 new cases. Now they're at 120, so they've cracked the 100 mark, and that's a big, another dividing line where I think you've gone into clear and obvious sustained community-level transmission there. Netherlands, 8 new cases. They're up to 18 now, and the Netherlands health authorities badly flat-footed on this whole thing, and really tone-deaf, I believe, as well. How many new cases? First case is Tunisia. First case, Jordan. First case, Latvia, Senegal. First case is Saudi Arabia. First case, Moscow. First case. So this is still spreading all over the place, and I know all of these countries have been very aggressively attempting not to have new cases coming in. And in the United States, I think we're well on our way here. Again, not to focus on the United States solely, but I think it does have some bearing on how the overall world economy unfolds here, being the world's largest economy. So this was a study, a lot of people sent it to me. Thank you to everybody who did. And what this is a cladogram here, and they're looking at, fancy word, the phylogeny. That's the family tree of these viruses, and each there's you can track them because they'll have slight genetic mutations as they go along. They make little copying mistakes, nothing vital, doesn't change anything, but there's a little copying mistake, and then you can compare where that virus came from. And the concern was in this report was they showed that there was this one case of a person who had traveled back from Wuhan, was the first case in the United States, I believe. And so they took the genotype of that, and then they compared it to the most recent case, which was a teenage boy, all the way out here 6 weeks later, and they're the same. So the translation of that is that the first case and the second case are genetically linked. The scary bit is those two cases are 6 weeks apart. The conclusion from that is it's been circulating for at least 6 weeks undetected. It had to get from this person to this person somehow, right? The prediction from that is there's many, many more cases to come from that because there are all those other undetected cases out there right now. And I put all that up yesterday. Today, we see this in the Washington Post, same conclusion. All right. One of the big things in the United States has been an absolute lack of testing. So what I want to do here is I want to play a little something that was on CNBC just this morning, and we'll just let this tape roll.
FDA commissioner and CNBC contributor. He serves on both Pfizer's and Illumina's boards. And Dr. Matt McCarthy, an infectious disease physician who is the author of Superbugs, The Race to Stop an Epidemic.
What do you do with people in the emergency room if you can't test them?
Well, we call and we try to test. We isolate them. We have an outstanding team of infection control practitioners who know how to handle this, but they're hamstrung by the fact that we don't have a diagnostic test available.
Are people getting sent home? Because I read reports of that over the weekend.
We're not sending people home. We're making sure they get what supportive care we can give. But keep in mind, we now have this in New York State, right? The person who tested positive was only the 32nd test we've done in this state. That is a national scandal. They're testing 10,000 a day in some countries, and we can't get this off the ground. I'm a practitioner on the firing line, and I don't have the tools to properly care for patients today.
The other challenge is that the providers can't take proper precautions if they can't test and
You've
diagnose.
been talking about this for weeks. That this is what we need to do.
They don't have the testing available in the States yet. It all has to be done in Atlanta.
On the on the therapeutic, I think this meeting today is focused on vaccines. We need to have a vaccine strategy. I think a vaccine is a year or two away. Right. I think we need to think about what we're going to have in the fall to be a backstop to this. Hopefully this will start to dissipate in July and August, but it's going to probably come back in the fall. And then what next? And the only thing that could be available in the near term is a therapeutic. If we have an antibody-based prophylaxis or a drug, because the vaccine's much longer.
Why isn't something existing in the HIV regimen that might work on a...
Well, we have an HIV drug, Kaletra, that we're studying right now. It's in a clinical trial. That information's not going to be available for a while. The message today is that we are hearing from this administration that the risk is low and that things are probably going to be okay. You don't need to change your lifestyle. That's simply not true. There are going to be thousands of cases here. We have already moved from containment to mitigation. We are trying to lessen the severity here. You are going to see widespread disruption to daily life. Do not believe the false reassurance.
So what does that mean in terms of what people should do on a daily basis?
Well, look, I think we're going to have outbreaks here in the U.S. There's no question about that. I think in parts of the country, we're past the point where we can contain this. We're going to have to look towards mitigation. Washington State, California. It doesn't need to become epidemic here in the United States. We have a much more advanced healthcare system. We have better infection control procedures in hospitals. I think we have the capacity to do that. I agree. We need to start taking more aggressive steps right now to make sure that this doesn't become epidemic.
China
so we don't look like Wuhan.
China had testing. How did China
China had
able
testing
to possibly be on the downside of the epidemic? How did they do it?
Well, and there's also something called the boomerang effect, which we may be seeing in Hubei right now, which is that places we think are clear are starting to have rates creep up. We may see things bounce back. But the key here is do not believe the false reassurance. I'm telling you, the cases are about to surge, and only then can we make informed decisions.
Doesn't that lower the denominator on the mortality?
Absolutely. So if we're talking about mortality rate, I see numbers like 1% to 2% thrown around. I don't believe that. The modeling we're using data out of Korea. We think that's the best.
And what is that?
0.2, 0.4%.
So that's twice as bad as a seasonal
Correct.
flu.
So a very bad flu season. Keep in mind, flu kills 25 to 69,000 Americans. So a very bad flu season.
The panic that has been caused already and the economic effects.
So widespread surveillance is going to start giving us information so that we can make these informed decisions about whether March Madness needs to be canceled.
For a while, this is going to be regional. You're going to have regional outbreaks where you're going to have more focus on it in certain parts of the country. Washington State, we're probably a couple of weeks away from some significant measures in Washington State to try to mitigate spread, and Northern California as well. Well, we have a lot of undiagnosed cases to his point right now. There's probably, low thousands of cases in this country that we now need to turn over the card on. So we're going to have a surge in cases before we start to catch up to the actual level of spread.
That's right. We're going to see school closures here, definitely. We're hearing that life's going to go about just like normal. That's not true.
Yeah, very much not good. I think Dr. Matt McCarthy got that just right. And I would bet there's already thousands of cases because that 6 weeks in Washington is a very long time to spread. Where else is it spreading like this? Pretty much all over the place. And so that leads to this next observation, which is this. The places that are testing most aggressively are showing up with lots and lots of cases. And I think somebody made a really great point, and I'd like to pass it along. And I picked this up on Twitter, so I apologize, forget who I got this from, but it was a great point. I'll search it out later and make sure I make note of that, because they noted that if you're doing more testing and you're detecting more cases, that might explain why your total death, and I didn't pull the column over, but also very low numbers of people in serious condition, probably because they're detecting more people, many of those who are in the low symptomatic non-dangerous, serious sort of a category. So that could explain why South Korea has so many total cases and relatively, proportionally, fewer deaths, fewer serious cases, is because they're doing so much testing. Italy is doing lots of testing. I think these Iran numbers are completely bogus. So we're finding that, but other places are not doing a lot of testing. Germany, France, Spain, USA, which we just heard about. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. I can't come up with a good reason why some of the wealthiest countries out there have not managed to figure out how to do lots and lots of rapid testing, but you can't be faulted for coming to this actual conclusion. This observation is, you can't have cases if you don't run any tests. And that, I'm not sure if that's the strategy here, but it certainly seems to be the case, thinking about that poor doctor on there running one of the largest hospitals and having to beg to have cases run. And I've got tons of stories and anecdotes in my email inbox of people having that same issue where they had presumptive contact with somebody who seemingly had the chance of having the COVID-19 or the honey badger virus, and begging their doctors to test them. They're like, no, and they had to fight through. Most of them can't get tested. They're just not doing it. It's not available. Advice I have here is that everyone, especially healthcare workers here, needs to treat this as an airborne disease. First, all the way back in the Lancet, this came back from January. This was from early case reports that are coming out of China, and that's where the most experience with this came from, a lot of clinical experience, and they wrote in this paper that the link is to here. It's right there. We are concerned that 2019 nCoV could have acquired the ability for efficient human transmission. Airborne precautions such as a fit-tested N95 respirator and other personal protective equipment are strongly recommended. So I think you have to go on the presumption that it's airborne until you know otherwise. And we had other weird cases, like back there in the case in Hong Kong, where it seemed to travel up and down through pipes across many stories, 10 stories in one case. How can the coronavirus spread through the bathroom pipes? Experts are investigating. And then more recently, we had that case where this woman who got the disease, presumably somehow from the people who had somehow the disease had escaped quarantine, which was sloppy as all get out, at Travis Air Force Base. She caught it and was circulating around in that Northern California community, and they were just using droplet precautions. That wasn't sufficient, and it turns out that more than 120 UC Davis healthcare staff in self-quarantine after possible exposure to the coronavirus. That was Saturday, February 29th. And here we are on Sunday, March 1st, and authorities announced that 2 California healthcare workers test positive.
That's right. This is a very, very serious situation in Santa Clara County right now. And you could tell that from the somber faces of the medical officials who are out here today announcing Santa Clara County's third case of the novel coronavirus. Now, that case involves an elderly woman with chronic health condition. She sought medical attention, and her doctor recognized some of her symptoms and decided to call the health department. The tests were done on that woman, and they came back Wednesday night that she was positive for the novel coronavirus. Now, this case is different from the previous cases that we have had in the county because this woman had not recently traveled overseas. She was not in contact with any close family members who had traveled overseas, so she got it somehow through the community. Now, the county health officer says that this is a turning point, and the community now must prepare for the possibility of widespread community transmission.
This case does signal to us that it's now time to shift how we respond to the novel coronavirus. What we know now is that the virus is here, present at some level, but we still don't know to what degree. An important priority, therefore, for us is to conduct public health surveillance to determine the extent of what's happening.
Now, health officials are saying that this is most likely transmitted person to person, but they're also urging schools and government buildings as well as businesses to step up their efforts to wipe down surfaces because it was said today from someone from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, that this virus can survive on surfaces.
The virus can survive on surfaces for a fairly prolonged period of time, more than days. But it is also very susceptible to cleaning products. It's mostly a person-to-person transmission that we're concerned about for our communities.
Now, county health officials are stepping up their community surveillance. Literal phone banks have been set up with county health workers who are calling people who may have come in contact with any of these individuals, as well as people who have previously reported symptoms to see literally what their temperature is. They're calling throughout the community. They likened it to the type of thing that you would see on election night when the get out the vote happens. But this time they're calling people, just checking their symptoms to make sure that they are still okay. And that is called community surveillance. They are stepping up that practice here in Santa Clara County now. But Alan, I know this is something that we've talked about that could happen in the Bay Area, and it is already here. We have to face the fact that coronavirus is in the community, and we have to take precautions now to make sure that it doesn't spread, or we can slow the spread.
It is, Len, but we are also in the middle of cold and flu season, the regular stuff, and a lot of people sick. They get cough, sniffles. They're not, most of them, going to get the coronavirus. When are you supposed to take those concerns to the doctor, though?
Well, the health officer said today that you should really watch your symptoms carefully, but the main thing is a fever. If you have a very high fever, then that is probably the dead giveaway that you should make that call to your doctor, and then you let your doctor and the medical professionals take it from there. But a fever is the thing to watch for.
Yeah, I mean, I know just from my experience being in Wuhan when this all first started. It was scary, you just didn't know what was happening, what was going on. I think as time goes forward, hopefully doctors and scientists will get a better handle on the whole situation. Fortunately, from what I understand, it is contagious, but the death rate is pretty low. So, yeah, I understand the fear.
So we look at this shape of the Thailand viral pneumonia cases. It turns out that on the 21st of February, Thailand had expanded its virus detection by changing the way they were recording these things. And so what they had done is they had proactively expanded to people developing pneumonia with unknown causes, right, in all these different places. And so all they did was expand the definition here. And that happened on February 21st, which would be 16, right around here. So everybody who's got pneumonia, anybody for any sort of reason that isn't bacterial, they're going to call them a patient under investigation, take a look at them, and put them in there. Is this more than we would normally expect that time of year? I'm not totally clear because I haven't seen the seasonal data on it. But it could have been that Thailand just simply changed they did. They changed the way in which they started recording these things. So let's hope that's the case, because then that would fit with this, and it would say that we have a summer reprieve coming, potentially, because Thailand being one of those warmer countries. Now, I'm a little concerned if we do have an outbreak in Egypt and parts of Iran right now. Those would be fairly warm areas. We're going to have to watch how it's spreading in all those other places like Jordan, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, all those other places. Because if it does spread in warm weather, and by the way, the reason that we think that maybe we could get a summer reprieve out of something is that that's the behavior of flu. I'm not sure a coronavirus necessarily follows the same pattern. Again, lots of unknowns in this particular story. All right, moving on. We are just bombarded. You should see my inbox, just bombarded with, and a lot of them I can't share because they came from doctors, hospital administrators, nurses who said, here's some information, but please don't share it, talking about the really, really bad, conflicting, contradictory information that they're getting from their health authorities all over the world. Well, not all over the world. I can tell you it's in Germany and the Netherlands, France, United States, places, basically, those sorts of countries. This is a case from Rhode Island, which says, Lord help us get the Department of Health informed. You are contagious even if you're not showing symptoms. Why would she, the health authority in Rhode Island, continually repeat you're only contagious if you're showing symptoms? Yeah, why would you say that? What's the data for that? That's an interesting claim to make. Here's somebody saying, Jonathan saying, I live in Rotterdam, Netherlands, and everyone is downplaying the situation. At RIVM, the Dutch CDC is denying asymptomatic transmission, as well as a longer incubation period, anything over 14 days. The Netherlands has the most dense population in Europe, and here's a conclusion.
Listen, until this entire thing broke out, China manufactured literally everything. Now, the cities in California are very densely populated. And for those that are out there thinking that now is the best time to buy the dip and the best times are ahead, yeah, I'm sure that they do plan to do some quantitative easing. Here's the issue. California, if it was another country, it would be the 5th most powerful economy in all of the world. They would be a superpower if California were its own country. That's how much California's economy is important for the entire United States. And honestly, it's a big tourist destination. And, you see the way that Disney has been impacted. If they need to shut down Disneyland after pretty much all of its Disneyland resorts around the world have been being shut down one after another, we could really see a lot of these major, companies begin to collapse. And it's not just places, for that type of recreation. You have movie theaters. Box office sales have been just crushed in China. Car sales have been crushed in China. I'm not sure how well the housing market is going to be doing. And honestly, they've overbuilt anyway. They've built around 4 houses per person in anticipation we would have a growing population. This kind of thing has a way of making people rethink the way they are handling life, the way they're handling big purchases, and where they're going to be buying a home, because with so much uncertainty that's out there, we may not have even seen the tip of this iceberg. And if California's economy were to come to a halt. Now, another thing many people don't know is that California is one of America's premier manufacturing states. It's not really known for that. However, a lot of things are manufactured in California. So we're talking about the impact that we could be seeing on the hotels. We're talking about the impact we could be seeing on the retail businesses, the little mom and pop small businesses. And literally, where are they going to find the funds to bail out the world? How could they bail out the 5th largest economy in the world? Now, I think the biggest eye-opener for many was the boy from Washington, that he was 19 years old. That's shocking to many because they were being told this idea that it's only people who are elderly that are really at risk, and that doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, most of the data they've been putting out recently, it doesn't even appear accurate at all. So this whole 2% idea, that's really just wishful thinking.
The world is scrambling to stop the spread of COVID-19. More and more cases are popping up in countries far from the epicenter of the outbreak. Tonight, there are more than 85,000 confirmed cases around the world. More than 2,000 people have died, mostly in China. But the scare is how quickly cases are multiplying. At least 56 countries now have confirmed cases of COVID-19. Iran has the world's highest death toll outside of China, and cases spiked again today. In the U.S., the man in Washington state has died from the virus, prompting the governor to declare an emergency. Here in Canada, a woman in her 60s who traveled from Tehran to Vancouver has contracted the illness. There are 20 confirmed cases in our country, and as David Aiken reports, right now, it's all about slowing the spread.
But in the United States, at least 4 cases have been confirmed with no travel connection. Evidence, authorities say, of person-to-person local transmission. And in Washington state, the first COVID-19 death. The Trump administration announced new travel restrictions on those coming from Iran and warned all Americans not to travel to certain parts of Italy or South Korea. New federal funds will also be made available to state and local health authorities for testing, containment, and treatment.
We've taken the most aggressive actions to confront the coronavirus. They are the most aggressive taken by any country.
But the president's claim is an arguable point. The province of Ontario, for example, has administered more tests than have been done in all of the United States. Same thing in BC, where 1,000 individuals have already been tested.
We test some individuals multiple times, so that's 1,425 tests, which is well over twice as many have been done in the entire United States.
Early and comprehensive testing is one of the key ways public health authorities can contain transmission of the disease.
It is a concern that they don't have the testing available in the states yet. They don't have the testing available in the states yet. It all has to be done in Atlanta.
Meanwhile, some frontline healthcare workers are pressing the Public Health Agency of Canada to improve the protocol used when assessing potential COVID-19 patients. They want to be issued respirators in addition to visors and surgical masks.
We need to talk about the precautionary principle, which is simple. When the science is not clear, we have to have the best protection.
Now, whether it's President Trump or Canada's chief public health officials, they all say the risk to public health remains low. But there is work being done in Canada and elsewhere to learn more about the virus, its incubation period, and how it gets transmitted from person to person. And that work is important
to keep the risk low.